Welcome to Healing from Within with your host, John Robson. This program helps you experience transformational shifts in your health and well-being to feel energized, vibrant, and alive like never before. Now, here is John Robson.
Hello, and welcome. Welcome to our third show here. Welcome to Healing from Within on Voice America Health and Wellness. I'm your host, John Robson, and I'm here with my special guest, Dr. Kim Jobst. And today we're going to be talking about the diseases of meaning paradigm and the importance of purpose in your life, in healing and growing. Dr. Jobst is an expert in the field of integrative health and medicine, and he's a true luminary and a great friend and colleague of mine. To read more about Kim, do go to the Healing from Within homepage, and just on the right there you'll see a guest tab on the show where the show descriptions are, and in there you can click and you can actually read a bit about Dr. Kim's history and where he's coming from. So Kim, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show, and welcome today.
Well, thank you, John. It's an honor to be with you, I must say.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Over the years, I think we've known each other since 2008, was when we both were working with the same transformative coaching approaches, and that's when I first met you. I remember after, I think it was a prophecy, I think it was during prophecy training, which was a course that Dr. Kim and I did together. I'll tell you more about that later. And you'd written the paper, you'd just written and published the paper with your colleagues on diseases of meaning paradigm, and I remember just being very excited to come to the back of the room and get my copy and have a chat with you about it, because I knew our work, my life purpose, and the work you were doing are very much aligned from the beginning.
Yeah, it was an intense time, I must say.
Yeah, 2008. It was
an intense time, and a lot of water's gone under the bridge since that time. And
yeah.
There you are in the United States, and I'm still here in a very cold and rainy Britain with grey skies.
Well, I'll send over some of the sunshine and warmth down the line for you so you can experience it. How's that?
Imagine. Yeah, that'd be great, and I'll imagine the mountains outside your window.
Exactly. Hopefully some of the guests that are joining us today, I hope from wherever you're joining us today, or if you're listening to this as a recording, wherever you are, whatever the weather's like, I hope this show really just builds your energy up, and you get to experience the pureness of the mountains and the big blue sunshine skies of Colorado here as well. So it's fun. So, Kim, tell me, you're an absolute wealth of knowledge, and I know you and I have had many transformative and brilliant conversations over the 5 years since I've known you now. But I was just wondering if you'd be able to share with some of the guests here that are joining us today a bit about your story, about your history in traditional Western and conventional medicine, and kind of what started to open up the doorway, and when was it started to open the doorway to you to see the more integrative model and the power in that, and begin that transformation in your own life?
Well, thank you, John. I think the story actually goes all the way back to when I was a small boy in Africa. I was born in Rhodesia, which is now known as Zimbabwe, and a bit like Colorado, huge big skies and big landscapes. And one of my most powerful memories was of, at the age of 3, picking a peach off my father's peach tree, and it only had 3 peaches on it, but it wasn't really ripe, and I couldn't put it back. And I remember being absolutely horrified that I'd picked this thing hoping it would be ripe, and I couldn't put it back, and then musing on that and wondering what on earth to do, and actually at that stage beginning to have the realization that there was a time for everything, and that everything has its own process. And the way my father handled that was magical and made a very deep impression on me, because far from being angry with me, which I thought he was going to be, he actually took the time to sit by this little tree and take me through it and explain it to me. I went on when we left Africa to come to the UK and develop asthma at the time. And to develop it quite badly, so much so that at one stage, I suppose I must have been about 8 or 9 years old, I had an asthma attack. I was up at the top of the house, and it was really very severe, and I thought I was going to die. And I had to find some way of communicating to people that were downstairs that I was in distress. And two things happened. The first was that I found a way of making that connection, sort of almost telepathically, but at the same time of realizing that the more afraid that I got, the worse my breathing was. And actually being able to get inside the process itself and liberate the constriction in my breath. So I didn't end up going to hospital, and I didn't, everything was fine. But the really important thing was of connecting something deeper, much, much deeper and more powerful, that actually brought my mother up the stairs. And then we can fast forward to when I was 16, and I was part of a very, very successful rowing team, and we trained incredibly intensely. And one day in the midst of a speed weights training session, I dropped my weights and tried to catch them. And I put the whole of the lumbosacral region of my back out, and everyone in the gym heard it happen.
For everyone is listening, that's just the lumbar spine, the lower part of the back, right at the bottom where it joins the hips. Yeah.
Yeah. And incredibly important, obviously, for one's stabilization and for being able to do intense exercise. And so I went from one day to the next, training 6-7 days a week to not being able to do anything. And the conventional physicians, orthopedic surgeons, reckoned that I was going to need spinal fusion. And I'll never forget one of the surgeons saying, well, probably by about the age of 21, you'll be a cripple and you won't be able to do anything like what you've been doing in the past. And I remember inside myself sort of thinking, that's insane. That's insane. And my mother took me to see an osteopath who helped but couldn't deal with the whole problem. And so I ended up seeing two of the original students of Alexander. And they made their first assessments and then gave me to one of their leading lights, a woman called Jean Robinson. And she started to work with me.
From the Alexander method.
From the Alexander method, absolutely. Yeah. And I'd been working with her probably for about 3 months or so, taking a bus into the centre of London and in quite a lot of pain, on and off. And on her table one day, having a complete experience of the way in which my body and my mind were linked, that how every thought affected every part of my body. And in fact, on that particular occasion, I went into an incredibly deep state, couldn't get off the table for a while. And then when I finally made it home, I slept for about 12, 15 hours. Afterwards, I never, ever looked back.
Gone into a deep regeneration there, like a deep insight, which really took you through the healing process. It's fantastic.
It took me into all kinds of dimensions. And I remember afterwards, at that time, I was really interested in acting, and I thought I might want to be an actor. And, I'd had the immense good fortune of playing some fairly substantial roles already. And Jean saying to me, we've got plenty of actors, but we don't have many people who really understand the link between the mind and the body. And perhaps it would be sensible for you to think about a therapeutic profession. And that went very deep.
Yeah. Such a profound state.
Yeah, it was. Although what it really meant in terms of medicine, I didn't like, because it meant a huge amount of study and a great long program, and I didn't particularly want to do that. And in fact, I went into agricultural sciences and forestry, but the pull was just too strong. And I was in fact in just south of Calgary, working as a cowboy on a ranch at the time, when sort of almost out of the sky, I had this absolutely profound call riding a horse that I had to go home, and I had to go back to university and tell them I wasn't going to do agricultural sciences and that I wanted to do medicine. And the really important thing about it was that I didn't want to do medicine because I wanted to be a doctor so much as I wanted to really understand the way people work. I wanted to be able to get inside people, and part of the calling was that in order to do that I needed to come face to face with death, and I needed to really understand the process that leads to ugliness and incapacity. And the confrontation with death was a big one, because at the time I had a real struggle with the fact that in order to become a doctor one has to cut people up. And when we went into medical school, and I managed to make the transition at Oxford, we had these big rooms with all these cadavers that one cuts up, and I was really struggling before we started, and I found a way of getting into the dissecting room by myself. And so I found myself one day surrounded by probably around 30 dead bodies on slabs, and I just had one question: what is it that distinguishes a living body from a dead one? And again, it was a very profound experience of realizing that on these slabs were shells, empty shells, and that there is something that vivifies that shell, that gives it life, that is real, that I could touch and that I could touch in myself, that completely dissolved any fear or thought I had about this being a wrong move and allowed me to go down the path.
Such a powerful story, and I can see so many of and we've talked about this before, but so many of the parallels in your learning and your experiences, and the ones I've experienced in my own life as well, and the insights that those experiences, although at the time maybe weren't great, they were perfect.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, they were. I think the important thing, and to share and to communicate with everybody, is that I struggled at the time with the fact that I couldn't make sense of it. But they were my thoughts, my feelings, and they were genuine, they were real. And I needed to deal with them and to be upfront about them. Mm-hmm. And I knew that if I couldn't find my way through that particular dilemma, I wouldn't be able to go on and go through the medical course. I had to find some way. And that conflict is what led me into that experience. And that experience has never left me. And, from then on, there have been a number of challenges of different kinds. And I was just thinking before we started the show that, what is the one thing that I would want to communicate above all else? And really it is that after 30 years in this game, and hopefully with another 30 to go, there is meaning and purpose to everything that happens. And it doesn't matter what it is. And that meaning and purpose is unique to each person. To bracket oneself merely as a statistic denies the uniqueness. And so whatever the suffering might be, and, in 1993, for example, I had meningoencephalitis, inflammation of the brain, the lining of the brain, of the heart, the liver, the muscles, a really profound state of deep, deep, deep inflammation. And the medics with whom I was working wanted me in hospital and to do lumbar punctures and all kinds of stuff. And 2 different viruses were grown at the same time. So, people thought, did I have HIV and all kinds of other things. And what was really interesting was that nobody asked me, what's going on in your life? What do you think this is all about? And in fact, that disparity again was really important, because it awakened me to just how important it is to ask people what they think is going on, because of course this is their problem and they know the answer somewhere. And it led me again into a pretty lonely and difficult space. But I realized that the conflict that I was experiencing at a deep, deep personal level was taking me, was causing an inflammatory process. And that inflammatory process, in fact, was going to take me to a whole different level of perception. And that has just gone on, and at that point also naively one thinks that one's going to come through this and then it's not going to happen again, that I've licked it. And of course, it just happens more and more deeply, more and more expansively as we go on.
Yeah, if there's deeper lessons that are to be gained from the experience, I notice this with a lot of the people that I get to work with. And in my own life, I've seen it too. If we really don't learn the full depths of the lessons that life was bringing us through that process of disease and illness, what that was bringing us to awaken to, then it will continue in many strange, weird, and wonderful forms until we get the completeness of it at that level. And then obviously as we evolve through our journey, pieces come back around to say, there's more, and it is such an individual, personalized journey. And that's what I love about this work that we're doing, is it gives people the opportunity through questioning to really do the deep discovery, to find out why now. Why would you have manifested this illness, this disease, these symptoms at this point in your life? Because even that is perfect. And so that's what I really love about these questioning tools that we're using to do that deep discovery and find that. Great. So what we're going to do, we're going to be going into, I hope you really enjoyed that. I always, whenever I hear Dr. Kim's journey to this work, I always am inspired, and it touches on so many of my own personal experiences too, that it really helps me to connect with that. So hopefully you've had that opportunity as well in this first section, where we're just going to be going into a short break now. But if you can, we're on obviously Healing from Within with my name's John Robson. I'm your host today, and this is my good friend, mentor, and guest, Dr. Kim Jobst. After the break, we're going to begin to discuss the 8 seeds of the new human rights that everyone is giving the opportunity to really bring into their own life. So we really look forward to rejoining you in just a couple of minutes. You take care.
You are listening to Healing from Within with John Robson. Now, back to Healing from Within.
Hi guys, welcome back. So yeah, just to repeat that, if you're in the US, then it's a toll-free number. You can give us a call if you'd like to call in. Maybe in the third section of the show, there's maybe an opportunity to take a call or two, and that's a toll-free number in the US, and it's 866-472-5792. And obviously, Dr. Kim and I are going to be joining together in many ways in the future as well. So if this show really brings more questions for you, then do send them in to that email address, john@meta-medicineUSA.com. We'll be able to pose those back to Dr. Kim, and we'll discuss them and bring them back to you in many weird and wonderful ways. So welcome back. And Dr. Jobst, welcome back too, and I'm really interested to hear more about, just in the break there, we were talking about an insight you were able to get through that process of disease that you had. So would you be able to share that with us?
Yes, just briefly, when I was a medical student, people may find this difficult to believe, but back in 1981, between 81 and 83, the practice of acupuncture was actually banned within the hospital system in the United Kingdom. And in fact, if one was found to be fraternizing with practitioners of what was then called fringe medicine, one would be disciplined. So I used to slip out of the medical school, out of the hospital in secret on a Wednesday afternoon to go and learn acupuncture with a very eccentric and extraordinary man just outside London. And I did that with a friend of mine who was also a medical student. And our teacher was brilliant. And one day he had an old Chinese master come over to give us some tuition. And I realized that the old Chinese man was using a completely different form of pulse diagnosis to what we had been taught. In fact, for him, one set of the organs was represented on the right-hand arterial pulse system, which was completely the opposite to the way that we'd been taught. So my friend Martin and I set up 6 patients for both our teacher and the Chinese master to diagnose, to see if they'd come up with the same diagnosis. And what was absolutely stunning was completely blind. They both came up with the same diagnoses, which just didn't make sense to the orthodox scientific mind. Here were 2 people with completely different systems of reading the pulses, coming up with completely the same diagnosis. And the only explanation for that could really be that their own thought process, that what they held in their mind, what they visualized in their minds, was calling forth something in the patient that gave them the information. And again, that was one of the things that really went in deep, because the implications of that are so far-reaching for everything that we do. Now, you need to remember, I came through my medical training and then went deep into 8.5 years of orthodox biomolecular research science in brain scanning and in the dementias and pathology and genetics and all kinds of things. So I've embraced both sides, and if there's to be a truth, that truth must be represented, whether you're working biomedically and genetically or whether you're working metaphysically and energetically. And my whole life journey has been to find a language that's common. And the more I study, the more I work with people like you, John, the more I know that to be a truth.
Definitely, and that's what we just really realize there is, when we've realized this many times, that there's only one truth, and there are so many pathways to that truth. And it's kind of the ability of the practitioner to use whatever system that aligns with their thinking, that helps them to rationalize in such a way that connects, whether it be connecting completely through intuition or logic or whatever avenue that makes most sense to them. And if they are open, fully open in that process, the information will always be there and presented for them.
Absolutely, and the key thing is also to the patient.
Yeah.
Because the patient knows whether it's working or not. The
Definitely.
patient knows at a certain level what it is that they're looking for. They may not know the answers, and that's why they go for help. We all need help, but one needs to be ever more responsive to that intuitive sense.
And in so many ways, we are sounding boards. We don't have all of the answers. What we do have are questions. And it's within that question, and we were talking about, and this some of our listeners may have been in this state of confusion, whether they work one-to-one with people or in groups, or actually they're experiencing things themselves. And it's just to be very comfortable in the confusion, very comfortable in the not knowing, because from confusion comes question, and to always be in question is a very powerful state to be in, because once you believe you have all of the answers, you've shut your mind down to the possibility of new information coming in. But if you remain in that open state of question, then you allow new information, new insight to come in. And the world is continually evolving. Our consciousness is continually evolving. Our understanding of disease, the mind, body, the interconnectedness of our being is continually evolving. So there's not many people out there that could say, I definitely know with absolute truth everything there is to know about life, about experience, about health, about disease. Because, those people, if they ever do that, you'll see them stumble and trip fairly shortly after making those statements. Would you agree?
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
I think what's also important is one can very rapidly get lost in the metaphysical. And if you've got a pain, or you're in the midst of, suffering with cancer or the early stages of dementia or an irritable bowel, whatever it might be, that is your reality at that moment. And it comes with a whole set of emotions and struggles, and one is looking for solutions. And most of the time, we live in a culture which says, well, block it, drug it, cut it out. And we look at that manifestation, that so-called disease, as something that is alien to us, that it's somehow not us. And I think the first step always is to remember that they're your cells, they're my cells. Nobody else put them there. Yeah. And the process that has given rise to this has happened in me, so that must mean there's also a process that can undo it.
Within me, yeah, exactly. Yeah. We were talking about that just on last week's session. I was really introducing the idea of our beliefs, our health beliefs, and how much our beliefs around health, about how we develop disease, whether it is a mistake, is it an error, or what are the health beliefs that really determine our behavior then when we get sick, and there will also be thresholds, because people that once they get, because what is their beliefs around cancer? I see so many of my clients that once they've been given that cancer diagnosis, it can mean so many different things to so many different people, and it's in the way that they actually process that, even the diagnosis, that's so important to their healing journey as well. Mm-hmm. Have you seen many things about that as well, the language?
The language is all important. I suppose the one of the thresholds in my own development was realizing that disease is health. And I was very fortunate to have been asked by the Dalai Lama and his team to participate in a seminar back in 1991 on global health and mental peace for mankind, and I felt wholly inadequate to the task. I had no idea what I was going to say. They'd asked me to bring 5 people with me, and the night before this was to happen up in the Himalayas, I had this moment of realizing that what all my life to that point had been leading to was realizing that symptoms that we call disease exist because we're healthy. They exist in order to wake us up to something. They are a language in their own right. And that transformation, that recognition that disease is health, opened this gateway of hope and light. So whilst I may have had a pretty serious diagnosis, as I have done in my own life, and I know you faced them too, John, mm-hmm. If what I'm presented with is something that is a closed door on the end of the road, for which there is, in quotes, no treatment, that evokes a whole mindset that has an impact on every cell in my body, every molecule in my body. Whereas if somebody can open that door and say to you, help you see that this is a language that is expressing itself in the substance of my being, and that this is a language I can begin to understand and to relate to and go into and explore with someone like yourself using metamedicine or any other technique, then all of a sudden I don't have a death sentence. I have a life opportunity.
Exactly, and that's what I really love about this work is because when we say that, disease is a manifestation of health, I didn't want to use it in the title just in case it was too much, but now that we've laid in some foundational things in our conversation here, I think people can really begin to understand that, in that there's very specific elements of all of the symptoms that you experience are so perfect for where your mind is at and where your life is at, that the body, I call it this, or it's called the body language. It's this language of the body, which is so profound. And I've been very fortunate in my own life to find a system like metamedicine, that actually helps to break down the language of the body, learn to understand the language of the body, so that you can apply it into your life very, very easily and really reveal to yourself a truth which is going to help you in your evolution. And it is a manifestation of your health, is the disease you get, because it is such a wake-up call, if you see it that way.
And that needs, we all need help. We all need mirrors, sounding boards. I think what's interesting is it's also being supported by, of course, discoveries in science, in physics, in biophysics, where we are beginning to understand that the observer affects the outcome of the experiment. We understand that light behaves as particle and wave, so there is no one defined state. And it's actually in these extraordinary discoveries that stand out right out into the galaxies and the functioning of the universe that we realize we have the potential to transform. And I don't mean that as something foofy-doof. This is really practical, down-to-earth stuff.
Real tangible, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I visualize, what I see in my mind's eye, what I feel, affects every system. And when you think about it, there is no thought, there is no feeling, there is no movement or action that isn't underpinned by a biochemical reaction, just at the simplest level. I cannot have a thought without my nerve cells doing all kinds of complex molecular things, firing off their cells, little packets of chemicals, whirring around inside my brain that then affect every other part of my body. So this is not something that's exactly, or intangible.
No, it's very much, and that's what I love about this time now, is all of the scientific research and everything is really piecing into the whole models of thousands-year-old wisdom, and I think it's a really exciting time to see this piecing together.
It's amazing.
Yeah, because it helps us to integrate the left and right hemispheres of our brain together. And when we do that, maybe we'll be able to begin using more than 5% of our brains in any moment. So it'd be great to just start beginning to go into some of those 8 seeds of the new human rights that we were talking about. So
this is so for years now I've been working with the idea that a disease, fundamentally disease is health, and I fully accept that that's challenging to people. And if that is the case, there's a language that we need to learn to understand. And that language, the symptoms that we have can be symptoms of distress, which are symptoms we want to try and do something about. They can be symptoms of success, of flowing in the right way. So if you're aligned, and you're aligned with what you're doing here in this world, you get energy, you get flow.
The flow, the concept of flow is such a powerful lesson.
It's beautiful, and it itself is a symptom. Now, we access that language, that system, by starting with a fundamental principle, which is that every one of us has a right to live a life at the end of which we have no regrets. Now, what does that mean? When you think about that, when you sit back and think about what you would really most like to have done in this life by the time you are ready to depart it, it can be a really salutary process. And for many people, myself included, one can be realizing that one isn't doing that, and that some of the struggles that I'm having are a response to the need to evolve it. And that leads into the second right, which is the right to adjustment. Now, adjustment is a very, very different thing to manipulation. And it's what I think particularly applicable, to osteopathy and chiropractic and some of those techniques where we talk about manipulation. And we talk about it in orthodox medicine too. Well, I'm just going to manipulate the chemicals here and I'm going to change the outcome. Manipulation is a very different process to adjustment. And the second right leads into that language to understanding that the symptoms that we have are a measure of how far we are from living that mission and purpose that will lead us to a life at the end of which we have no regrets. Now, that in itself is then predicated on the third. And the third right is the right to one's own path. I'm sure that every listener knows the feeling of having other people's values imposed on us.
Yeah, which when we were talking, I put out the show description, those 3 regrets, 3 main regrets. The top one was to not live the life that you'd selected for yourself, and you'd actually lived a life of someone else's choosing. So many people come to the work with us, don't they? And they say, I've lived 45, 50 years of my life because of what my parents wanted me to live.
Absolutely.
Because of, yeah, and there's so much tension and pressure inside of their body that's manifesting as all number of different symptoms, and then if we run that forward, that is when you end with regrets in life, because you didn't choose what you would love, and you didn't follow your heart with you, connected to your mind, connected to your unique expression. You followed somebody else's, so it's always going to lead to a place of regret, and the symptoms of your body will show that. Well, we're going to go into the last short break of today's session, so we're looking forward to rejoining with you in just a couple of minutes, where we're going to continue this journey through these 8 seeds of the new human rights, and hope you're really enjoying the process. And again, listing down in your journal any of those questions that are really coming up and the insights that are coming for you. So we look forward to joining you again in just a couple of minutes. You take care.
You are listening to Healing from Within with John Robson. Now, back to Healing from Within.
Hi guys, welcome back. So just to confirm, those first 3 of the 8 seeds of new human rights for you to maybe list down is that the right to joy, and a life of which at the end you can have lived in a way that you have no regrets. That's the first. And then that leads into that understanding of to have a precise adjustments to one's trajectory, rather than manipulation, rather than going against self, but just those subtle adjustments which allow you to just align both your spine and your mind, and the right to shine on one's own path as well. That's so important. So yeah, Dr. Jobst, would you be able to continue forward with those with the rest?
Absolutely. I'll try and go a little bit more quickly, and I hope people will bear with me in doing that, because I'm so keen that if there are questions that arise that are relevant to people's own individual lives and what they're going through, you and I are really about trying to help on that path. So the right to one's own path, free of other people's constraints and projections, is crucial. That's number 3. And the 4th then is to set all of that in the context of contributing to the success of the planet as a whole. To see that when you live your own path, when you understand the language of your own body and your own internal mechanisms in its expression, which is leading you to live a life without regrets, when you are in fact being a supreme egoist in that sense, you contribute paradoxically to the success of the planet as a whole, because you allow that space for other people.
And it's that law of the one and the many, isn't it? It's
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I love it actually, because we're not brought up with that, and our aim is to make sure that these things are taught in schools, but I won't get sidetracked. The 5th way is to realize that we are all engaged. Every single one of us, without exception, 7 billion people on the planet, in the most sophisticated university that has ever been created anywhere in the known universe, and that's the University of Life. And the University of Life has an ongoing system of education, the language that we begin to understand through our symptoms and through our inner promptings that enable us to express our own unique talent. And what we're feeling at any given moment tells us where we are in our degree course, if you like. The 6th is the right to be in the best posture to succeed that. Now, what that really means is the right to embodiment. It's one thing to know this stuff as a theory. It's quite another thing to have access to the systems and the information that enable one's body to be aligned, one's spine to be aligned, one's metabolism, one's nutrition, one's thinking, one's feeling to be aligned. And that needs people like you, John, doing metamedicine, and our other colleagues. The 7th is the right to inspiration. Of course, if one can live a life like that, one will be inspired. But the importance for that is that it follows on from the right to embody. Because once one is embodied, one needs to be able to breathe. And breath is life. And the breath is life, and it's the life of inspiration. And finally, that enables us to the final right, which is the right to participate in and to co-create a responsible culture. Never has it been more important at the time when our planet is is in crisis, which, as you know, in Chinese can mean either crisis or opportunity. Never has it been more important that people wake up to this opportunity. And the beauty of it is that we can do it using these methods that allow people to lead full and responsible lives.
Absolutely wonderful. And just before we go into somehow making this real, so we can actually tell some real stories here about how we've helped people to apply these things in life, it's also important to just bring up about the ability to live one's own life. So many of us, the selfishness thing has been embedded on us. Don't be selfish, learn to share. So, and like you say, in living a life completely congruent with our own self, it can feel selfish at first until we have that model of thinking on, which is that, and I'll use a metaphor that's been used so many times, and I was just on a plane back traveling as well, and I heard it again, so I'll use it now, is that until you have put your own oxygen mask on, don't attempt to try and help put somebody else's oxygen mask on, because you're going to have trouble in the whole thing, and you might pass out, and then you might not be able to do it anyway. So then both of you are in trouble. So to have that inspiration, put your own mask on first before you're even in a position where you can help another to put theirs on.
Absolutely right.
So yeah, wonderful. So let's. So you were mentioning there a patient of yours, a client of yours that came in, where this was really applicable, this work in their own life.
So a while ago, a very, very wonderful, highly educated woman and filmmaker who came to me in the middle of the winter about 7 years ago, with a rare form of, early form of a leukemia. And I realized when I saw her, and I had no idea how we were going to tackle this into any kind of ordinary sense of what one might do. But as I sat and I listened to her, I realized that there was a part of her that wasn't at all sure whether she wanted to be here. And so my first question to her was, it seems to me that you haven't decided whether you really want to be here or not.
In terms of life. As a whole, yeah,
absolutely. Whether she wanted to be with me in a consultation.
Yeah,
although
that was another side.
And she's still somebody that I see to check up from time to time. But a diagnosis was fairly significant and severe, and that was 7 years ago. So, what happened in that moment was she looked at me and said, "I wasn't expecting that."
Perfect question.
But what was really interesting was that she said, "That's it. That's really it." And I've been terrified of admitting that to anybody. And that opened the door, because it opened the door, if you like, to the first seed. So what was she going to be here for? What was with where she was at and where she had come from? Such was the internal struggle, such had been the pain, that was a big question. Do I want to go on? And first of all, opening to that changed the entire field. And we could then explore it. And 7 years later, there's a woman who has assisted many, many, many people as a result of what she discovered. And of course, that then we could do investigations and other things, and I could use some nutrition and some homeopathy and whatever else. But that was the starting
most
point.
Important question, yeah. And it just so reflects a client that I've been working with, and she's obviously given permission to share this. And she came to me after 10 years of experiencing systemic lupus, and it was really bad. She'd been, on disability for a number of years and in a really bad place. And it was that same realization. It was really wonderful when she actually shared with me, after some investigation and some really helping her to understand how diseases of meaning manifest. She was able to share that I drew this illness in to systemically break myself down from within because I didn't want to live. And it was so beautiful to be able to see the choice and the responsibility and the power we have when we're dealing with these things. And then obviously from that realization, if I'm doing this, then I too can change it. Like you say, it really brought in the ability to then look at, okay, so what's gone on in your life? How are you misaligned with these 8 rights that have led you to this place? And let's start breaking that down and transforming the energy so that you get excited and inspired to live a life of your choosing again. And that's so important, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And I think, it's crucial. Because what one forgets is it takes energy to break down, just as it takes energy to build up. And the process that leads, especially in something like lupus, which, it's an autoimmune condition just like my other lady, that is self-attacking self.
And that's such a powerful metaphor in itself. The autoimmune disorders are,
Isn't it?
Self-destructing self.
And self-destructing self is also the possibility for the phoenix coming out of the ashes. The self gets consumed in that. But it's at the same time not to forget that, you may need some building blocks. You may need some substance. You may need some dietary change. You may, the inflammation is fed by a certain situation, all of which is integral to the whole picture. So, I caution people to guard against forgetting
the nutritional component.
That's right. And the lifestyle issues.
Qigong and exercise, and definitely. That's what I love about the work, is that it's not just one way or another. It's a complete integration of lifestyle components as well as the transformation process.
Absolutely.
It is a body to the mind and a mind to the body. It's a two-way street for sure.
Absolutely. John, in metamedicine, what's the key tool that you use?
The key tool in questioning or in transforming?
Both.
Yeah, in questioning, there's a very specific 12 question analysis process that I'll take people through to really break down the what's been going on when they trigger their symptoms. That really gets the whole story of the disease and the illness and the themes, the conflict themes that they've been running in their life. That's got to this threshold point of such an extreme expression of disease. And once we see that whole story with it, it's very obvious when it comes. And there's such a bravery that comes from clients that even get to the position where they allow themselves to be asked the questions that they know a part of their ego is going to have to die. It is that death and rebirth of the phoenix. So in getting to that place where they come to be asked these questions to reveal something about themselves is such a wonderful step that they've made. And then in transforming that, I love to use Qigong as an exercise form because it helps them to build the internal Qi. But I really love the transformation process that we use, the DeMartini method or quantum collapse process that helps people to then just change the way they're looking at this thing and break down those walls in the mind that they've built up. And you've probably had much wonderful experience of working with that too. We've worked on teams, you and I together, and also in larger teams for larger groups. And we've seen just how powerful and profound that work can be.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. The key principle being that everything always and everywhere is balanced.
Yeah.
There is always an opposite. So if you are feeling unwell, if you are unhealthy, somewhere else its opposite exists, and it's finding that frees the therapeutic, the healing energy.
The trapped energy, that's those ego states that are keeping this disease in place, they do require energy. So by bringing them together with their polar opposites in the moment frees up so much energy from that trapped state, which is then can be used for the actual healing journey and the living the life of inspired mission.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Wonderful.
So how are we going to help people with this?
So we were discussing before that we're going to actually begin putting together some projects to run live and in web trainings. And that's still in your mind too, right?
Absolutely.
That's one ways that we're going to be really doing this, is putting together some work, and also finding out some of those key questions that from this show people have really sort of opened up to. And then we want you to be asking us, sending the emails, connecting with us on social media to say, this is the pieces that I would really love to find out more. And then Dr. Jobst and I can piece together the perfect thing that's going to help you to go from where you are to where you want to be. Because both of us, that is our true inspired purpose and mission, is what we're trying to do here, is go there. So it's been wonderful to share with you, and it's time to head off today. But thank you so much, Dr. Jobst, for being with us, and we'll join you again soon.
Wonderful. Thank you, John. It's been my pleasure.
Take care.
Bye-bye now.